History doesn't always survive in official records. Sometimes it lingers in silence, pressed into the corners of a forgotten photograph, waiting for the right eyes to notice. One image, one strange structure, and one chilling, handwritten note. Noble 17 Third Transport, leave no trace. For nearly 80 years, that phrase meant nothing to anyone who stumbled upon it. But when experts finally examined the photo closely, they realized it was not a record of weapons or victories. It was a record of grief. It was about memory, about men who refused to let their fallen brothers be erased. This is the story of a missing airfield, a hidden memorial, and a crate that carried more than cargo. It began quietly, far from any battlefield, in the basement archives of Dartmouth College. The archive was an unassuming place, rows of metal shelves holding boxes donated by veterans' families. Most of it was routine material, service medals, logbooks, and fading uniforms that smelled of mothballs. But on a cold afternoon, Dr. Aaron Kessler, a 58-year-old military historian with more than 3 decades of experience, opened a package that would change everything. The box had been sent from the estate of Walter Brinkley, a retired American aircraft technician who had recently died in rural Vermont. Tucked among his belongings were technical manuals, engineering sketches, and several aerial reconnaissance photographs dated the spring of 1944. One of those photographs immediately caught Kessler's eye. The image showed a full airfield in Norfolk, eastern England, dated April 10th, 1944. A clean runway cut across farmland. 2 hangars stood on the edge of the strip. A squat control tower rose beside them. Smaller outbuildings dotted the landscape. At first glance, it was ordinary, the kind of image thousands of reconnaissance teams had taken during the war. But when Kessler cross-referenced the grid coordinates against official maps, his pulse quickened. There was no record of an airfield at this location. Not in Royal Air Force archives, not in the declassified US files. On paper, the base had never existed. Kessler brought in his assistant, Lena Morey, a digital imaging specialist. She enlarged the scan and pointed to something faint along the far eastern edge of one hangar, a rectangular shape, almost invisible to the naked eye. Its edges were geometric, deliberate, too precise to be natural. They checked a second photo from Brinkley's collection, dated just 3 days later on April 13th. The airfield was still there, the buildings unchanged, but the mysterious structure was gone, completely erased. Even the ground showed no outline. In the bottom corner of the April 10th photograph, handwritten in dark ink, were the words, "Noble 17 Third Transport, leave no trace." The phrase was not standard military jargon. It wasn't in any manual, yet its meaning was hauntingly clear. Something had been built there, and someone wanted it erased almost immediately. To dig deeper, Kessler contacted Raj Patel, a former Ministry of Defense analyst with years of experience tracking wartime logistics. Raj combed through property records. In 1944, the site had been listed as an agricultural district. But in 1946, the paperwork changed. The land was suddenly labelled reclaimed pasture, a phrase only used when farmland had been temporarily occupied for military or industrial purposes, and then deliberately restored to nature. But there was no record of an official base there, no record of industry. It was as if the land had been borrowed for something that had never officially happened. Meanwhile, Lena compared the wartime photo against modern LiDAR scans. She noticed faint geometric scars just beneath the surface, straight lines, rectangular foundations, evidence that something had been built and later torn out. The photograph wasn't a mistake. It was a record of something real. The next clue appeared in Lancashire, inside the Warton Aerodrome Museum. Warton had been more than just a fighter base. During the war, it had served as a joint US-UK hub for prototypes, experimental cargo, and unrecorded missions. It was also the last place Walter Brinkley had been stationed. In a neglected backroom behind a rusting cabinet, Raj discovered a wooden trunk marked Brinkley, 1944 Personal. Inside lay sketches, yellowed notes, and a battered brown notebook, Brinkley's maintenance log. Most entries were routine, engine serviced, tools checked, but one line stood out. Flight log 674C delay at Noble. Lieutenant Rowe is fuming, crate loaded, told to stay silent. The note gave them a name, Lieutenant Curtis Rowe. Kessler traced Rowe through US Air Force records. Rowe was a C-47 transport pilot stationed at High Wycombe. His logbook was meticulous, every flight carefully recorded, except one. On April 10th, 1944, the same date as Brinkley's photo, Rowe logged a 6-hour flight. But the entry was blank. No route, no cargo, no destination. The missing log matched the missing structure. Rowe had died in 1982, but his daughter Margaret still lived in Somerset. She agreed to speak. Margaret explained that her father rarely discussed the war, but just before he died, he mentioned a strange mission. He had been ordered to land at an airfield not on the charts. He delivered a sealed wooden crate into a small concrete shed guarded by 2 MPs. He was told to leave immediately. No names, no questions, no reports. Margaret still kept his personal journal. Most of it was in shorthand, but one torn page contained a single line in plain English. They said it wasn't our war to question, but it was something worth hiding for decades. Back at Dartmouth, Lena reprocessed Brinkley's photo again. Using shadow modelling, she enhanced the hidden structure. It was modular concrete, built in sections, with no windows and no vents, possibly refrigerated. Tyre tracks led into the structure, but none led out. Raj reviewed Allied transport manifests from the week of April 10th, 14. One entry leapt out. Archive B, restricted contents, acquired North France, to be held until retrieval. It was dated April 10th, the very day of Rowe's blank flight. Kessler realized this must have been the mysterious crate, but what was inside it? Weeks later, after Raj filed a Freedom of Information request, the team received a heavily redacted reply from the Ministry of Defense. Most of the text was blacked out, but one line remained. The referenced site was part of Operation Fairford, April-May 1944. The facility was temporary. Objective: honor and preservation of wartime fallen. No further comment. It was not about weapons or intelligence. It was something else entirely. Lena enhanced the image once more using spectral filters. Across the roofline of the vanished structure, faint letters appeared. For the fallen, do not remove. Along the outer wall, beneath the roofline, rows of rectangles came into focus. Portrait frames. Some seemed to hold shadows resembling faces, others were empty. And beneath one, faint handwriting spelled out, "Left behind, but never forgotten." The truth was undeniable. The structure had been a memorial, built quietly, unofficially, by airmen who could not bring their comrades' bodies home, but who refused to let them be erased. It was raw, human, and unofficial. And that made it dangerous for military record keepers. The easiest way to deal with it was to erase it from history. But then came a discovery no one expected. The crate itself had survived. Misclassified and buried in government storage for decades, it had never been opened. After weeks of negotiations, Kessler's team was granted access. Conservators carefully lifted the lid. Inside were 6 sealed envelopes addressed to families in Illinois, Texas, and New Jersey. Letters that had never been delivered. 2 rusted sets of dog tags lay beneath them. A folded American flag, a scorched flight map with penciled X's marking a crash site, and a tattered photograph of 6 smiling young men standing in front of a B-17 bomber. One envelope contained only 5 words. Please tell them we tried. It was not intelligence. It was not a prototype. It was grief, preserved in silence. The military had erased the memorial because it was unofficial, unrecorded, too personal to fit into official history. But Brinkley's photograph, taken before the site was destroyed, had carried the truth forward. Kessler and his colleagues chose not to announce their discovery immediately. Instead, they spent months locating the families of the 6 men. They scoured census records, war archives, and local registries. One by one, they delivered the letters in person. Some families broke down in tears. Others could only write back in disbelief. In Oklahoma, a surviving niece revealed that she had kept a picture of her uncle tucked inside a Bible, still believing he was missing in action. Now she finally had an answer. Again and again, the families expressed gratitude in simple words. Thank you for not forgetting. Eventually, a new memorial was commissioned near the overgrown field in Norfolk, where the original had stood. 6 names were etched into stone. Inside a glass case, curators placed Brinkley's photograph, copies of the letters, and the dog tags. At the dedication ceremony, Margaret Rowe, the daughter of the pilot who had unknowingly delivered the crate, was invited to speak. She opened one of the recovered letters, looked out at the small crowd of descendants and historians, and read aloud, "Please tell them we tried." Then she added softly, "You did, and we finally heard you." The field fell silent. It was not a grand spectacle. There were no generals or dignitaries, just families, scholars, and a handful of quiet observers standing in recognition of men who had been nearly erased. Later that evening, as the last visitors drifted away, Lena placed a single red poppy at the base of the new memorial. Raj stood beside her. "It almost didn't happen," she whispered. Raj nodded. But it did, because one man kept a photograph, and someone else looked close enough to see. A few steps back, Dr. Kessler held a restored copy of Brinkley's original reconnaissance image, now sealed in archival glass. Once dismissed as a routine wartime snapshot, it had become evidence of memory, a reminder that even when history tries to erase, truth survives. So the question remains, should long-buried wartime secrets remain hidden, or should they be uncovered, even after decades of silence? And if you had been the one holding that photograph, would you have spotted the detail that changed everything? Tell us in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.